If you have the courage to hear the full nightmare, stay till the end. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to uncover more terrifying stories like this. Only those who listen till the end will understand the full horror of it, and I promise it will haunt every corner of your mind. I never believed in ghosts, or so I told myself as I unlocked the front door to my new apartment in downtown Portland. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the faint scent of damp carpeting, a typical sign of a recently vacated space. My golden retriever, Max, trotted ahead, tail wagging, sniffing everything, but then he froze. His hackles raised, ears twitching. He was staring at the far corner of the living room, where the wall met the shadow of the hall. I laughed nervously. "Max, come on," I said, crouching to scratch behind his ears. But his low growl sent a chill up my spine. It wasn't playful. Max rarely growled. He barked once, then twice, sharper this time. His eyes locked on nothing. I followed his gaze. Empty. Nothing but shadows stretching across the freshly polished floor. Shaking off the unease, I carried boxes in, listening to Max's nails clicking against the hardwood. Each creak of the floor sounded louder than it should have. I set the last box down in the bedroom. The apartment was quiet, save for Max pacing. Then came the faintest sound, a whisper. I froze. A soft, almost imperceptible exhale of air seemed to come from the corner Max had been barking at. I rubbed my eyes and shook my head. "It's just the wind," I whispered, though the windows were closed. Max barked again, this time a long, drawn-out bark that vibrated through my chest. I glanced at the corner again. Shadows seemed thicker there, denser. I tried to ignore it and set up the living room, unpacking dishes and books. Every time I glanced at that corner, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Max wouldn't leave it alone, pacing in small circles, whining, and sometimes growling toward that exact spot. By the time night fell, the unease had grown unbearable. The streetlights outside cast long beams through the blinds, creating shapes that danced along the walls. Max stayed in the corner, low growls rumbling from his throat. The shadows seemed to stretch further, reaching toward him, toward me. I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. Then came the first soft tap, a knock against the wall from that corner. I froze. Max's barking intensified, echoing off the empty apartment. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from inside. I sat on the couch, heart hammering, Max trembling beside me. Only a fool would stay in an empty apartment when the hairs on their arms were standing at attention. And yet, I couldn't leave. Something about the building, the corner, the silence, it called to me, daring me to look closer. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper, every shadow felt like it was alive. And as the clock ticked past 3 a.m., Max barked one last time, sharp and urgent, as if warning me of something I couldn't yet see. I thought the first night was bad. I was wrong. By the second evening, the apartment felt different. Not just empty, it felt alive, in a way that made every nerve scream. Max refused to leave the corner where he had barked the night before. I tried distracting him with toys, treats, even lying down beside him, but his growls and low whines never stopped. He stared, eyes wide, ears pinned back, his body stiff as a board. Then I heard it, the first real whisper. Soft, almost playful, a single word that slid along the walls like silk. "Leave." I froze, heart hammering, scanning the empty room. No one was there. The whisper repeated, this time louder, closer. "Leave, leave, leave." I tried rationalizing. Old apartment. Echoes. Wind in the vents. But something inside me screamed that this wasn't ordinary. Max barked again, lunging toward the corner. His bark wasn't directed at a person, nothing visible, but at the shadow itself. I turned the lamp on, casting the room in harsh light. The corner was empty. Nothing. Yet the shadows clung unnaturally to the walls, stretching, writhing. One seemed to detach, thin and twisting, reaching across the floor toward Max. My stomach churned as I watched it move, slowly, deliberately, impossibly. I stumbled backward, heart in my throat. Max growled louder, hackles bristling, teeth bared. Then the whisper came again, closer than before, almost beside my ear. "You shouldn't be here." The floorboards creaked under invisible steps. I could hear them circling me, slow and deliberate. Every instinct screamed to run, but something held me in place, as if the apartment itself had a grip on my mind. Max barked and leapt suddenly at the empty corner, but he hit nothing. The shadow recoiled like it had been struck, only to reform instantly, stretching, twisting, moving like liquid. I backed into the bedroom, slamming the door, trying to shut out the presence. But the whispering followed. "We are here, always." I called my friend, Sarah, her voice calm over the phone. I told her about Max, the whispers, the shadows. She laughed nervously. "Probably just your imagination, Han. You're stressed from moving in." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the cold touch that brushed my ankle told me otherwise. Nothing should have been there, yet I felt it. Icy, curling around my leg, pulling me toward the corner. I fled back to the living room, phone in hand, ready to leave the apartment entirely. But Max stopped me. His barking changed, a long, sharp, urgent bark that cut through the thick tension. I followed his gaze. The corner, it wasn't just a shadow anymore. Something, someone, was crouched there, impossible to see clearly, blurred, like the air itself had mass. Then a single word hit me like a knife, clear and final. "Leave." I wanted to run, but before I could, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. Max's barking and growls overlapped with whispers, hundreds of voices now, all urging me to leave, but also laughing, mocking. I realized then that whatever lived in that corner, in that apartment, wasn't just waiting. It knew me. The next morning, I woke to silence, but not the kind that's peaceful. The air was thick, heavy, as if the apartment itself had exhaled overnight. Max was at the corner again, sitting rigid, eyes locked on nothing. My heart pounded, every instinct screaming to leave. I told myself it was exhaustion, that moving into a new place messes with your mind. I stepped into the living room. The shadow from the night before was gone, or at least I thought it was. The corner looked empty, but the space around it felt warped, alive, like the air itself was shifting. Each breath I took sounded too loud, echoing off the walls, as if the apartment was listening. Then I noticed the books I had unpacked the day before. They weren't where I left them. One was on the floor, another teetering on the edge of the counter, as if an invisible hand had nudged them. Max growled low and long, hackles raised, pacing the perimeter of the room. I tried to ignore it and went to make coffee. The machine wouldn't turn on. The lights flickered again. A cold breeze swept across the kitchen, though every window was shut. I froze as the whisper came, so close I could feel it against my neck. "You can't leave." I spun around. Nothing. Max barked at the corner, once, then twice, his voice sharp and desperate. I swear I saw the shadows stretching, bending, forming shapes that weren't there before. Limbs, faces, eyes that blinked too slowly, too deliberately. My stomach churned as my rational mind screamed at me to leave, but the apartment seemed to resist. As evening fell, the darkness deepened unnaturally. The hallway lights flickered, and for a brief second, I saw it. A figure crouched in the corner of the hall, staring at me with hollow, black eyes. My breath caught. I blinked, and it was gone. Only Max remained, his growl vibrating through the floorboards. Then came the scratching. Soft at first, like nails dragging across wood, moving closer, circling. I backed up, heart racing. Every shadow seemed to move on its own. Objects shifted, books, shoes, even the coffee cup I had set down. Each movement felt deliberate, mocking. I tried calling Sarah again, but my phone buzzed with static. A whisper sliced through it. "Leave, or stay forever." My skin crawled. Max barked and lunged at the empty hallway, his bark sharp, almost human in its terror. I realized then, the apartment wasn't just haunted. It was alive, aware. And it didn't want me here by nightfall. The shadows had begun to creep along the walls, reaching toward me, touching the furniture, twisting around corners I hadn't noticed before. Max barked constantly, refusing to leave my side. The apartment felt smaller, tighter, every corner stretching impossibly farther than it should. I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper, every shift of shadow felt like the apartment breathing, closing in. My mind spun. If I stayed another night, I feared the shadows would touch me, claim me. Max whimpered beside me, and I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. I had to leave. But leaving wouldn't be simple. By the fourth night, I was no longer convinced the apartment was simply haunted. It was malicious. Every sound, every shadow, Every whisper felt like it was waiting for me to make a mistake. Max refused to leave my side, growling low and warning me, his fur bristling every time I even looked at the empty corners. It started subtly. A single note, written on a scrap of paper I hadn't touched. Leave now, or it will come for you. I didn't understand how it got there. My apartment door had been locked, the mailbox empty all day. My stomach turned. I wanted to scream, to run, but the shadows seemed to thicken in response, curling along the walls like black smoke. That night, I barely slept. The whispers grew louder, clearer. This is ours, you cannot stay. I could feel them moving, circling, closing in. Max barked at the corner again, his bark long, urgent, almost human. Something shifted behind the shadows, a form, crouched, watching. I could feel its eyes on me, unblinking, patient. I tried recording everything on my phone, thinking that somehow documenting it might keep me safe. But the camera showed nothing, only darkness, shadows stretching unnaturally along the walls. Yet the whispers continued, mocking me through the static of the microphone. You cannot leave. We are here. By midnight, the apartment had become unpredictable. Objects moved on their own. A chair sliding across the living room floor, books tumbling from shelves, the lights flickering violently. Each time Max barked, it was as if the shadows responded, twisting, reaching closer, daring me to flee. I sat on the couch, trembling. Max pressed against me, his growls deep and desperate. I thought I heard footsteps approaching, slow, deliberate. I checked every room, empty. Yet the sound persisted. Then came the chilling clarity, a voice, cold and rasping, directly in my ear, though no one was there. You will leave, or you will never leave. I ran to the front door. It was locked. I never locked it. Panic surged. Max barked furiously at the corner. Then the figure appeared, a dark silhouette that twisted impossibly, crouched low, limbs stretching in ways that made no sense. Its voice whispered through the walls. This is ours. Your fear feeds us. I realized then that the apartment itself was alive. It could manipulate reality, warp perception, and toy with my mind. Max lunged at the corner again, growling with everything he had, and the figure recoiled, dissolving into shadows. I knew I had no choice. I had to leave. But even as I packed my things, I felt the eyes of the apartment on me, waiting. As I opened the door, a single whisper floated in. Leave, or face us forever. The threat wasn't vague. I understood now that staying would be impossible. I had to go, and fast. That I thought leaving the apartment would end it. I was wrong. As soon as I stepped into the dimly lit hallway of my building, Max's growls erupted again. He froze mid-step, ears flat, eyes locked on the empty space behind me. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, bending, curling, moving in ways no normal light should allow. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but Max's low, warning growl told me otherwise. The elevator ride down was unbearable. Every flicker of light made the shadows stretch, elongate, twist. I could feel them, pressing against my skin, breathing, watching, and then faint whispers. At first, I couldn't hear the words, just soft, deliberate breathing and faint laughter. Then the words became clear. You can't escape. We are with you. I reached the lobby and ran outside. The street was empty, eerily quiet for a Friday night in Portland. But the shadows didn't stop at the doorway. They spilled into the street, thin tendrils stretching along the pavement, following my every step. Max barked and lunged, snapping at the darkness, but it moved around him effortlessly. I tried calling friends, anyone, Sarah, my neighbor, but my phone buzzed with static. Faint whispers now coming from the speaker itself. You cannot leave. This is ours. The shadows seemed to react, swirling more violently, as if feeding off my fear. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. Max barked frantically, and for a brief moment, I saw a figure crouched on the sidewalk, its face featureless, limbs twisting impossibly. Then it disappeared into the shadows. I slammed the door, locked it, and drove off. I told myself leaving would break the connection. But when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw shadows creeping along the streets, following me. Every turn I took, every streetlight I passed, the shadows mirrored my movement, keeping pace. By the time I reached a friend's apartment across town, the shadows had receded, Almost. Max stayed alert, growling at corners, at empty spaces, as though the darkness could materialize anywhere. I tried to sleep, but faint whispers seeped through the walls of my friend's apartment, too soft to be real, yet impossibly clear. You cannot hide. We are everywhere. I realized with chilling clarity that whatever had been in the apartment wasn't confined there. It could follow, warp reality, manipulate perception. I had brought it with me, or it had claimed me. Max whined beside me, a low, desperate sound. Every instinct screamed that I couldn't stay. And then came the final warning. A single, sharp knock at the door, followed by a whisper so cold, so close, it felt like it had entered my chest. Leave the apartment, or face what we do to those who resist. I understood then. Leaving wasn't just an option. It was a command. And if I failed, I knew the terror wouldn't end. It would only grow. I thought I had escaped. I was wrong. The next morning, I received a package at my friend's apartment. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid photo of my apartment's living room, empty, except for the shadow in the corner. I flipped it over. Written in jagged letters. Leave now, or you will stay forever. My hands shook. Max growled low, back arched, staring at the photo as if he could see it move. He wouldn't come near me. For the first time, I realized he wasn't protecting me. He was warning me. I tried calling the building management. Nobody answered. No one seemed to know the apartment existed. It was as if it had never been there, yet the photo proved it had. Panic curled in my stomach. Every logical explanation shattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers returned, faint at first, echoing through the walls of my friend's apartment. You cannot escape. We know you. The shadows seemed to seep under the door, black tendrils stretching across the floor toward Max. He barked, snapping at the empty space, but the darkness recoiled only momentarily, like it was testing boundaries. Then the scratching began. Slow, deliberate, circling the room. Every object shifted, chairs scraping floors, books sliding off shelves, a lamp teetering dangerously. Max growled at the corner, refusing to leave, and I realized the whispers had stopped talking to me directly. They were speaking to him now. A sudden crash made me jump. The door to the apartment building across town, my friend's, thudded shut with no wind. My heart raced. A single word whispered through the room, echoing from nowhere. Leave, or else. I couldn't ignore it. I tried to rationalize, to convince myself that leaving the apartment alone would be enough. But the shadows had followed me. I could feel them in the corners of the room, curling around walls, brushing against furniture. Max whimpered, eyes wide, hackles raised, staring at the empty space near the window. Then came the message on my phone, a text from an unknown number. You have one choice. Leave the apartment. If you do not, we will make sure you never leave anywhere. No number, no name, just the threat. I felt it then, physically, the air pressing against my chest, chilling me to the bone. My limbs trembled. Max barked, leaping at the corner of the room, teeth snapping at shadows that didn't exist. A whisper followed, sharp and deadly clear. This is ours. You belong to the apartment. I knew, with terrifying certainty, that ignoring the warning was not an option. If I stayed, I would not survive this. The apartment, the shadows, the whispers, they had marked me. And now, even miles away, they were asserting control, reminding me I had to obey. I began packing immediately. Every movement felt heavy, oppressive. Max pressed against me, refusing to leave my side, growling at every corner, every shadow. I understood then that leaving wasn't just about escape. It was about survival. The apartment had already begun to follow, to haunt, to consume. And if I failed to act, it would claim me completely. By the seventh night, I understood that running had only delayed the inevitable. The apartment's presence wasn't limited to its walls. It was inside my mind, inside the air I breathed. Every shadow I passed in the streets twisted unnaturally, stretching longer than the streetlights should allow. Max refused to leave my side, growling at corners where nothing should exist, whining when I looked at empty spaces. The first sign came when I entered my friend's apartment. Shadows that weren't there before had begun to cling to the ceiling, sliding down walls like liquid black smoke. I tried to flip on the lights, but they flickered and went out. The whispers started immediately. You cannot escape. You belong to us. They weren't far away. They were everywhere, circling me, whispering into my ears, pressing into my mind. Max barked, snapping at the shadows, lunging at empty space, his teeth slicing through nothing. Yet the shadows recoiled, almost playfully, before stretching again, testing limits. One tendril reached toward my leg, brushing against my ankle. I froze. The air turned icy, my breath forming clouds in front of me. The whisper came again, sharper this time. Stay or suffer. I tried to call Sarah, but the phone displayed static and then words etched into the screen. You will not leave. My chest tightened. My thoughts raced. The apartment's power had followed me, attached to me. There was no safe place. Then I saw it. The full figure crouched in the corner, like I had glimpsed in my apartment, but larger now, more menacing. Its limbs bent impossibly, stretching and twisting, its faceless head tilting in my direction. The shadows around it seemed alive, writhing with hunger, reaching toward me, and Max lunged, barking and growling with everything he had. I backed into the wall, heart hammering, panic threatening to overtake me. The whispers became laughter, soft at first, then louder, crueler. Every shadow in the room began to move independently, spiraling toward me, cutting off exits, pressing in from every angle. Max barked frantically, biting at the black tendrils, yelping as if the shadows were striking back. Suddenly, a cold, invisible force slammed me to the ground. The whispers screamed, "Leave or be OURS." I felt the air tighten, wrapping around me, squeezing, trying to pull me into the darkness. Max barked, growled, and lunged, refusing to leave my side, his courage the only thing standing against the overwhelming terror. I realized then the truth. The apartment, the shadows, the whispers, they weren't just haunting spaces. They had claimed a connection with me, a tether I couldn't sever. If I didn't obey, if I didn't leave the original apartment, I would never be free. The shadows weren't content with chasing me. They would consume me wherever I went. Max whimpered, then barked violently at a single corner, a focal point. The figure crouched there, faceless, stretching impossibly, whispering, "Your choice." I knew what I had to do. I had to return to the apartment that I never thought I would go back. I shouldn't have, but as I sat in my friend's apartment, Max trembling beside me, the whispers became unbearable. They weren't just outside anymore. They were inside me, inside my head. Return or be ours forever. The decision was terrifying, but the alternative, remaining trapped in shadows that followed me everywhere, was worse. I packed what I could, Max pacing frantically, growls deep and urgent. Each step toward the car, each block I drove, I felt the apartments pull like invisible hands tugging at my soul. By the time I reached the building, night had fallen. The streetlights flickered, casting long, unnatural shadows. Max growled, ears flat, hackles bristling. The lobby was silent, too silent. I stepped inside, the air thick and suffocating. The hallway stretched impossibly farther than it should, every shadow bending toward me, waiting. I reached the door to my apartment. My hands shook as I turned the knob. The air shifted, cold and heavy, carrying the faint scent of decay. I stepped inside. The shadows were everywhere, crawling along walls, pooling in corners, writhing like living things. The figure crouched in the corner, faceless, limbs twisting impossibly, staring at me. Its whisper slithered into my mind. "You should not have returned." Max barked and lunged, snapping at the figure. The shadows recoiled, then surged back, wrapping around the furniture, the walls, the ceiling. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I froze, realizing that the apartment wasn't just haunted, it was sentient, aware, and it hated intruders. A sudden knock came from the wall, sharp, deliberate, like a command. Then a whisper, cold and menacing, "Leave or stay forever." My stomach twisted. I wanted to argue, to fight, but deep down I knew the truth. If I didn't leave this apartment, the shadows would consume me entirely. I gathered what little courage remained and turned toward the door. But as I moved, the walls seemed to stretch, elongating, twisting, forcing me to confront the impossible geometry of the apartment. Max stayed close, growling at corners where nothing should be. Then the final whisper, chillingly clear. "If you leave, we will find you. If you stay, you will vanish." I ran. I didn't look back. The shadows surged behind me, brushing against my heels, clawing at the edges of reality. Max leaped beside me, growling, barking, a single beacon of defiance against the darkness. I reached the car, doors slammed, engine roared to life. As I drove away, the apartment's outline appeared faintly in the rearview mirror, stretching and twisting, impossible angles forming in ways that defied physics. And on the dashboard, a note appeared. No handwriting, just a whisper I could feel. You cannot leave. This is ours. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if the shadows will let me live, or if they are merely biding their time. All I know is this. I left the apartment, but it hasn't left me, and I never will. Somewhere, in Portland, the shadows wait, and they are patient. If you enjoyed this horror story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon for more terrifying stories.